We are live. Welcome, everyone. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes.
And then for those of you that are joining right now, I just want to welcome everybody to our kickoff for our 6th week of Zoom chats. So this is a free weekly live stream that we're hosting through AIGA Detroit, and where we get a chance to talk to different creatives, both here in our community, across the US, abroad, on different topics related to each of their professional careers, where we can gain inspiration and insights and just learn from each other and be able to hear stories from various creatives and their personal journeys, their work. So I'm really excited to have Michael Nÿkamp be our guest creative today for Zoom chats today on this Tuesday. So for those of you tuning in, whether you're here locally or tuning in from elsewhere, feel free to use the chat button here in Zoom, or if you're tuning in through YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, feel free to leave a comment in the thread, or feel free to use the chat section here in Zoom. Let us know where you're joining from, whether you want to list your city, your state, the country you're visiting from. We want to welcome each of you, and excited for today's talk with Michael. So we're going to get started in just a minute here with the presentation. Just some quick housekeeping for those of you that are tuning in. We will have a Q&A with Michael after his presentation. So if you do have questions, either while he is presenting or during the Q&A section, feel free to use the Q&A button here in Zoom. You'll be able to type in questions that you have for Michael, whether it's something related to something he presented or just some general questions you may have for him. Feel free to use that Q&A button here in Zoom. For those of you that are going to be tuning in on other platforms, just leave a comment and we will address the comment that you leave, whether it's in Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, and we'll make sure that gets to Michael during the Q&A moderated section of today's Zoom chats. So with that being said, Michael, I want to go ahead and introduce you. I want to welcome you and thank you for being part of today's kind of kickoff for the 6th week of our series that we're doing, this creative free weekly live stream that we're hosting through AIG Detroit. Really excited to have you on this broadcast today and to hear a little bit more about your personal story, your work. I know I've followed your work on Instagram for a while, really respect the kind of minimalistic, very timeless approach to a lot of your work. It's really thoughtfully made and just beautifully designed. So really excited to have you part of this series. And with that being said, Michael, feel free to take it from here.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay.
There we are. All right. So like Marion, just me, I'm Michael Nÿkamp. I'm an independent creative and the owner of MKN Design. So I know I wanted to provide you with a little bit of my career path, and I was trying to figure out a meaningful way to provide you with context. And I thought I would provide you like a chart to show you the expanse of where I was in 1994 when I had my education to now. So I did that in a chart form just to show you kind of like my career path and how I've grown over that time. So just briefly to give you some context about where I've been and what I've studied. So I'm originally from Ontario, Canada. I grew up and lived there for a portion of my life, and I studied at Sheridan College. In 1994, I studied art fundamentals and then moved on to illustration. and then new media design. So, you know, funny progression there from art fundamentals was like art history, life drawing, graphic design. You got to learn a lot of mediums, printmaking. And that was only a year program. So I really honed into illustration, and I decided to apply for the program, got in, and I studied for 4 years illustration. From illustration, I decided I wasn't done with my education at that time, and that's when the internet was really starting to come around. And I studied new media design, which is really focused on designing for the web. So UX UI wasn't even talked about then. It was just design well for the web. What are the better experiences for the users that come onto it? Because the internet back then was pretty ugly. It was very ugly, and that was the core of the program, was to design better from a development standpoint, from a UXI standpoint. During that time, I worked at HFK, which is House of Kevin. It was a modeling shop. So we did a lot of exhibit designs for museums and trade show booths, along with dioramas of apartment buildings and houses. So really interesting job. Got to work with like engineers, designers, woodworkers, welders. So some of these things were pretty life size, you know, so it was a really interesting and fun place to work while I was in school. After I was done new media design, I worked for Virtual Broadcast Corporation in 1999 to 2000, and I was a Flash designer there. I did banners for their shows, and they did shows that was on the internet at that time, which is kind of like YouTube, but a very pared back version of YouTube. So I did all the banners for them. After about a year or so, I got kind of bored of doing that, and I was hired, got a phone call, and I was hired into March 1st in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I went down for the interview, got the job after, you know, a 2-week period after hearing from them, moved down here to Grand Rapids, and I've been here ever since. So I worked there from 2000 to 2002, and then it was after like close to 9/11 happened, and then you know, the economy tanked a lot, and then I got laid off. From there, I worked at DesignBox. I was a designer there and held many hats. So a lot of the web design, some illustration work, some design work. So it was interesting to work there. I was more a pair of hands at that time than anything. There was no strategy that I did or anything high level. And then again, I got laid off after about a year, and I worked for the Calvin bookstore, and I was a backroom manager. So this was, again, an intermediate job. I didn't expect to stay there at all, nor did I want to. So in between the Calvin bookstore, and I got hired back on in DesignBox again in 2005, I started kind of MKN Design, and I did intermediate. You can see the dashed line here. I took on projects when they came in. And whether there were branding projects or some illustration projects, or sometimes I did some work for DesignBox when I was laid off too. So that really helped out. So, you know, after my hiring in 2005, I worked from there all the way till, 2009. And again, I was doing a lot more higher level work. I did some art direction. I was doing, of course, print was a big thing for DesignBox. We were working for large furniture manufacturers at that time, so I did a lot of print work. So not only producing the books, but also working on the back end of presses, press proofing or color proofing. So I had a keen eye for that as well. So I learned a lot of stuff through that process. They weren't very, they were strategic, but I was never involved in that strategic or that process. So I was still more a pair of hands, but still coming up with concepts and stuff. After the layoff 3, you know, I'm like, this is it. I'm just going to do full time. I'm tired of getting laid off. So I'm just going to do this full time. So I did for the next 2 years, and in between, I was an adjunct professor for Kendall College of Art and Design, and I taught industrial design students kind of the 7 principles of design, layout, and how to use the Adobe products to do better layout, because their students were having trouble with laying out things. So I kind of helped them through that process. And then unfortunately, not unfortunately, I should say, at that time, I was working freelance for People Design, a great firm here in Grand Rapids, very well versed in process and really user-centered design. And as I was working with them, they were like, hey, can we just hire you? And I said, sure, yeah, why not? So worked on a contract with them, got hired, and unfortunately, about a year after, I got laid off again. So, and then I did, MKN Design from 2012 to 2020. I was working on at my own company, MKN Design. Intermittently, I've done side projects. So Midwest UX is a conference. I think maybe someone or some people understand what that is. But I was a design lead because we petitioned for it to be in Grand Rapids. So I was design director of design lead to promote also, the experience of the conference and what it meant for people to come into our city and experience Grand Rapids and all the things with the conference, the talks. Also worked on some group projects with some other designers, another illustrator designer, and then also a typographer from Monotype. So, I do these little things on the side which are meaningful to me, which kind of help me grow and get me introduced to some other people. And then I started the Illustration League with Lucy Engelman, who is an illustrator. I think now she was in Grand Rapids. I think she's in Pennsylvania now. So the big thing about the Illustration League was we found, from an illustrator background, we found that a lot of people were not pricing the work properly. Designers didn't understand what the prices were, why licensing was necessary. So we wanted to start the best practices of helping illustrators with contracts and stuff. Right now it's intermittent. We're just really only online and on Facebook. We did have meetings, but we have a group of people, but again, we're all independent and we all have our own business. So that makes it really hard to get together and do meaningful things with the Illustration League. So hopefully maybe in the future that'll start up again. But as you can see from 1994, 2000, a lot of, through here is more a pair of hands and learning. But also, as I went through, like I said, People Design, they're really good at process and strategy. So I got to learn a lot of great things through that. And that really helped me define what I wanted to do in a career. I didn't really go right out of college and do freelancing right away. It's hard, but, I liked how I could learn from other organizations, especially in Design Box. There are some really great people that taught me some really great things. So as you can see, the layoffs really were the impetus of me going on my own and feeling good about it and knowing what I was doing and having a clientele to do it. So so that kind of provides you some background about me. But I wanted to provide you with, if you decide to go to be an independent or a freelance, this is for anyone from someone coming out of college to, someone who is either my age or younger, wanting to be a freelance or independent business. Just realize that I have a disclaimer that this is only a starting point. You need to research further. I can only do so much or write so much and talk to you so much within this time period. So definitely I'm pulling out the key points in this. So some starting steps, first of all, definitely determine what type of service your business will specialize in. There's something called the business model canvas, and this will help you visualize your business. If you just Google that, there's some maps that you can actually fill out. And the business model canvas is supposed to be evolved over time. So this is something that you keep on your wall and change constantly. It'll help you kind of figure out what your specialty is, who your clients are, what your rates are, that type of thing. Definitely identify your clients. I always think that having clients before you start a business is probably the best aspect, because if you just kind of go on your own and you're trying to find someone, it gets a little harder, especially if you're trying to support a family or yourself. Think of all the things that you need to, you have to have health insurance, you got to buy food, there's internet, all those things, so try to have some clients before you start. Setting up your business pricing structure, value-based or hourly rate. Value-based is basically, one lump sum for a big project or a branding project or creating a brochure or doing a photography shoot for a company. Also set a cost for that your business will not work under. So for instance, okay, I will not work I will not work for money below $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000. So at least set that up. If a project sometimes, especially smaller projects, that that $500 job really might be $1,500, $2,000 job. So realize that $500 sometimes doesn't cover anything. Other things that are really important are two things. Set up Google Sheet document that calculates project estimates based on the process that you have, if you have a process. If not, research the process that you want to have. Also, make sure that you're documenting all your hours that you work, because this will really kind of help you in order to estimate future projects down the road. And like, oh, I went over here in this area, in this phase, or wait, I really underquoted that. Now you have some information, some data that will help you really, estimate projects that are worth the money that they are owed. So number 6, I have generated a name for your business. Select a name that resonates with your audience, users, and customers. I chose mine out of really quick, but it stayed MKN Design. K is for my wife's name because she does all the accounting for me, so it just became MKN Design. A lot of people use their name, which I think is perfectly fine because you are independent. That's how people will know me. But now I'm known as either Michael Nÿkamp or he's the owner of MKN Design. So also coordinate with the domain name search. It's really hard finding domain names nowadays. Everyone has snatched up every name possible. So make sure you're coordinating with that. And that has a lot to do with consistency. Set up your business as an LLC or S Corp with your state. It's just a professional practice. A lot of it has to do with legality. So in case you get sued, they do not come after your home stuff, but they can only come after your business assets, not anything that you have for your home or your house or whatever. So just a professional practice to do. Set up your brand. So logo, business cards, website. You necessarily don't need business cards, but it's always nice to hand out to people. And there's so many places online where you can get some reasonable cards for a reasonable price now, or use someone local to print them out for you. Again, set up your business assets, contracts, invoice estimates, proposals. Make sure they're branded towards you. That really helps you define you as a professional as well. Definitely be consistent with your brand. It can evolve over time. Mine has. But if you look at any company, brands evolve. You should evolve, especially when you get experience. You will evolve your business, especially maybe your specialty. Definitely learn how to talk about your business and how you're able to help your potential clients. Kind of like an elevator pitch, but not so salesy, I guess. Develop a nice high quality website. There's plenty out there that you can develop sites with for little monthly payments like Square, Wix, WordPress. I'm trying to think, Behance. I'm sure there's a ton more. So definitely use that to update your website, update content on your website often if you can. Definitely open up social media accounts. I only have 4: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Promote yourself as much as you can, the work that you get done or the work that you're doing on your own. Or people that you're helping or mentoring. Definitely promote yourself. I think it's important. I know it's a little weird to do it. It does help you out. Every business does it anyways, and you should be too. I know it's weird because you're reflecting on yourself and who you are as a person. And I guess you could say that's kind of weird, but you could also put it into a business perspective as well, like making sure that people know what you do. What are your core principles for working with people? What's your process? Those types of things. Maybe it's words of wisdom every day on Instagram. I don't know, just throwing stuff out there. But networking is such an important part as well. Agencies, nonprofits, businesses, and organizations within your field, like AIGA or IXDA. These are important places to find people of like minds to network with. And usually these people know of people or know of someone who's working. I know AIGA in Detroit or anyone within your area has a Slack channel, so that's really helpful to go to. Definitely try to find larger projects to work under a retainer. This really helps you. Sometimes projects can be 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes for me, they can be 2 months, 3 months, over a year. This really helps to kind of define the work throughout the year, like in proposals that you're proposing. So you can figure out how many clients you can take at a time too. Make sure that contracts are very important. Make sure that you have clients sign a contract for them, especially for the work that you're going to do, the deliverables that you're going to give, and the cost for doing all that stuff. Clients will have an NDA probably that you may have to sign. They also might say, listen, no, we're going to give you a contract. Just make sure you read through that contract and you understand it. And if you don't, ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. If you want to strike an item, talk with them, like saying, I don't really want that in there. Can we maybe word it a different way or just take it out? Make sure, or maybe you can combine your contract with their contract. Sometimes they do that too, but just make sure you know what you're looking for or looking into when they're providing a contract to you. Let's see. In terms of payment, I typically ask for 50% up front and then the rest at completion. This is typical business. You should ask for money up front. You should never wait for money, at least not the full portion of it. You should always ask for work up front, especially if you, like myself, sometimes I hire other independent people and I need to pay them. I still need to have that money up front, perhaps for programs I need to buy or other things for my office or business. Or you can, get payment in thirds, whatever you're negotiating with your client with. I think that's important. You can have 2 to 3, I would, 2 to 3 projects at a time. I think that keeps you busy. And, sometimes it's one, but just make sure that you're doing a lot of networking. The other thing that I want to tell you, so I have starting steps, but I also have some financial steps for you to look at. Definitely open up a business bank account under your business LLC or S Corp name. I think that's really important. It's very professional to be doing that, and especially from looking at financials. Separate your business from home expenses, so you're not like using stuff for your business for your home, and vice versa. File for an employer identification number, so you're not using your Social Security in W-9 or 1099. I think it's just another professional thing that you can set up as. Definitely saving is really important, as I found over time. Sometimes you'll have low times, sometimes you'll have really busy, but sometimes work doesn't come in as soon as you think it would, or you just have this dry spell. So like emergency account or fund, we do here 6 to 12 month cushion when we can. Save up for retirement or any investments you're making. Definitely save up for taxes, 25 to 30% for quarterly taxes. That's really important to be saving up for that, because the government's going to take your money, whether you like it or not. I wouldn't pay them at the end of the year. I would pay them via quarter. It's cheaper that way, and it makes more sense from a business standpoint. Definitely, I'm giving you this information, but hire a CPA or tax accountant, or invest in some bookkeeping software. Like I said, Kaylin, my wife, who runs the business with me, she does all the accounting for me. So that's great. But we still have a tax accountant that we go to. And I think that's really helpful, because they know all the ins and outs of taxes, and therefore. Definitely keep all your business receipts, save receipts for domain and website hosting, email, office supplies, business meals, advertising costs if you have anything, software and app subscriptions. Definitely keep track of mileage, because that is also going to be deducted from your taxes. And then also check in with your finances every week. Balance your checkbook. It's really important that you know what's in your bank at all times. And then there's this book out there called The Money Book for Freelancers, Part-Timers, and Self-Employed. So a great book. I do have other meaningful advice, but I can get you the books, a list of books afterwards. So definitely, in terms of meaningful advice, definitely keep on learning. Read books, listen to podcasts, learn new programs and software. I'm actually, I finally picked up an iPad Pro, and I'm learning Procreate. totally not my thing, but I need to learn it. So, you know, different software and stuff, it's really important for you guys to, learn new things, whether it could be maybe a new process, or maybe it's like understanding marketing a little bit more. There's so much you could do to help your business out. Take calculated risks. I know I say that really carefully too, because, I would never take a risk that I don't have any backing for in terms of money, definitely. So make sure you're thoughtfully taking a risk that way, because they can push you in good directions as well. Like you've heard before, making mistakes is okay, but learn quickly from them. Because if you don't, you'll just blunder all the time. Chris Dew has this quote here: "Failure is a way forward." Definitely, you learn from your mistakes and you learn to be better at what you do. Definitely be kind and direct, but kind and empathetic to your clients and the people you work with. This will only help you with client relationships and people management skills if you manage any people. Definitely listen, especially if there's a problem with a client. It's really listen, definitely listen. And it could be perhaps there was an issue and you need to talk through that carefully, listening and responding to what your client is saying to you. Fifth here, it's okay to say no to the project, especially when it's underpaid. But instead of just saying no to the project, education to a client is or a potential client is really important. If they don't understand why it costs so much, you should say, listen, you got to think about this. That's based on your process too. It's really helps them understand why it's not. Now, this might not change their mind, but it could change their mind. I always say base your feedback from them not on a personal perspective, but a business level. So don't say like, I need food. Always respond to this stuff like that on a professional level. Like, I'm experienced. I know how to do this. I know these programs well. I know how to solve that problem that you're having an issue with. So just know that it's okay to negotiate as well with the prices, especially if you need the work too. Like, it is okay to negotiate. Sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. It depends on who you're dealing with, what client is, and what their business is looking for. Never quote a project on the phone. You might have a sense in your head, but at least ask them and provide them information. What are you looking for? Who's the audience? When's the due date? Sometimes due dates can come really quick. They're like, can we get this done in a week? And really it's maybe a 2 or 3 week project. Well, perhaps then you can charge rush fees. And I think those are totally fine. Just let your client know that you are going to do that. And think about, take time to thoughtfully think about the project and all the intricacies of what you're going to be doing through them, from meetings to emails or admin, I would say, to creation, to actually defining iterations. There's just a lot of work there, so thoughtfully think about them. So when estimating our project, make sure you review the estimated proposal with your potential client. Don't send the email and have them review it. They're just going to look at the bottom number. It's important that while you're talking through a proposal, that you're educating through that proposal as well and why you want to utilize this. It is, again, like I said, it's okay to negotiate, but make sure it's equal pay for the work you're hired to do that a client wants you to do. Negotiate is always a great thing to do. I always say, don't put service prices on your website. It cheapens what you do. And I think it's not professional business practice. I don't think it works well. People steal those numbers all the time and think that they can either lowball you or come higher than you. Definitely understand and be well educated in contracts, licensing, and service contracts. And I say that only because clients will give you contracts, and you'll be also providing clients with your contracts. In licensing, especially for photographers and illustrators, even designers, if you license an illustration, it is important that you put something in there for licensing, because if you don't have anything, perhaps their contract says it's a work for hire and they get to own all that work in perpetuity, and they don't need to pay you anything more. So the thing with that, with photographers and illustrators, they can make money through licensing And there are lots of different types of licensing. If you actually go to theillustrationleague.com, there is a area in there where you can actually look at different types of licensing. And it's important that you know them and be well educated in them, because most possibly designers and businesses do not understand licensing. All they want is we want to buy out or a work for hire. So, and they don't know what the stipulations are behind that. So understanding that is very important. Definitely 10, have a process defined for your business. This only helps you professionally in understanding the different levels of how you work through a project and understanding a project before you even sometimes quote it. I will show you my process, just a high level of it in just a minute. Take meeting notes. I see sometimes people don't take meeting notes unless they're recording. Recording is fine too, but just as long as the client knows that you're recording the conversation. And providing those meeting minutes back to them. This only ensures that all the information is down and that they agree with the information. And this will help with potential problems down the road. Like, I didn't say that. I'm like, well, yeah, you did, because, you know, you said this over here, you know, a couple months back. So this is only helpful for you. Research companies before you will be doing work for them. I think is important. I think people within your community would be more than happy to help you with getting to know people behind people that are hiring you. You know, because you never know who you're dealing with too. So it's good to know. If you ever have the opportunity to mentor or help a nonprofit, you know, do it. Definitely do it. I think I know pro bono work is kind of like, you know, designers shouldn't be doing that. But I think if it's meaningful, you should do it. If it's meaningful to you and your company, do it. I just recently did a pro bono project for creating masks for hospitals and shields. I created the whole logo identity for them with the help of, you know, people within the group. That was pro bono, and I think, you know, I'm like, that was meaningful to me. I needed to do something to help out, and this is how I did it. So definitely, you still need to establish the terms of work so that you're not iterating constantly. That there is an end to the project, that there is some sort of defined agreement between you and the other party. Create when only you want to create. I always say don't force yourself. I know there's that slogan, create every day, but that's a lot of pressure. You know, I think creating every day, it can be tiresome. I've done that before, and it just gets really tiring. Like, what am I going to do today? And you spend time racking your brains. But if you have an idea book, which is great to have, I have tons of them. You just scratching out ideas or sketches, you can always come back to them and create anything from those. Take time to meet with family and friends. When you're independent, this is really important, because a lot of times you are alone and you need that time with other people or people within your community who are other designers or illustrators. And the other great thing about being independent, you can have naps. You know, sometimes I take 15-minute naps, good caffeine naps. They're great to have. And the thing I just seen yesterday from Steve Martin, one of my favorite comedian actors, is laugh off rejection. You will get it a lot, but it's okay. You learn from that rejection too. And you know that it's going to happen. Just laugh it off and just move forward. So next slide. Is process, and I just kind of want to briefly show you the process I work under, but I want you to understand too, process doesn't help make a good design product, right? It just doesn't. It just really helps the project be transparent, efficient, and focused. So it also helps you educate your client on what you're going to be doing through all the process statements, especially if you have a proposal. So this is kind of derived from the design process by Terry Lee Stone, or managing the design process. So it's my take on it, and I've pared it down a bit, but you know, this, oops, sorry about that. This over here, you know, is kind of like trying to figure out, understanding what the product is, what the problem is, who the users are, solving problems for users, not necessarily problems. And then, you know, define and develop. Sometimes, you know, the client already has this figured out, and you just really need to execute on it. I like there is actually more, I think, empathy if you actually do that first phase. It just makes a better project all the way along, because you understand everything. You understand the problem and what needs to happen, and how you need to be defined throughout. Okay. So I provided some books and podcasts for you guys. It's just my recommendations, especially if you're going to start freelancing or starting an independent business. I would say, Brutally Honest is great. Things like Freelance and Business and stuff, that was a great book to really help me. It still does even help me. In terms of like, don't get a job, make a job. These are just things that is really good. Work for Money, Design for Love. In terms of legal standpoint, there's a Pricing Ethical Guidelines that is really great. Legal forms for rep designers and illustrators. These are great assets to have, kind of look through and kind of understand everything. I think there's even one for photographers as well by Tech Crawford. Some things from a strategic standpoint, which I'm more into, is like a designer's research manual, the strategic designer, and then managing design processes and implementing design. These are great things. And then stuff for like marketing, Blue Ocean Strategy. I know these are really, gimmicky books, I always feel, but they're really good reads. And you necessarily don't have to read the whole thing at one time unless you're into that. You can always like read a chapter at a time, or the thing that you're trying to figure out. I think those are a really great thing. Here's the Money Book for freelancers, part-timers, and self-employed. So that's a really great book to read too. So I do have my list over here as well. Some podcasts, Listen, Learn, Do, the Future Podcast with Chris Do. A great 3-point perspective podcast. Those are 3 illustrators who get together and talk about a whole bunch of things about illustration. Design Matters with Debbie Millman, great. Some of these were provided to me on Facebook yesterday because I asked and I didn't know. So some of these I really need to go back to and look at. But take time to kind of look at these as well. Other than that, I have time for Q&A as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. That was a very thorough and really great just exposition on, working for yourself. So thank you for going through each of those items and just kind of diving a little bit deeper. Really appreciate that.
No problem. Love to.
And then for those of you that are here in Zoom or tuning in on different platforms, feel free at this time during this Q&A section with Michael. If you have questions related to some of the things that he shared related to working for yourself, going independent as a designer or an illustrator, feel free to leave a comment on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. And for those of you that are here in Zoom, there's a Q&A button. So just type up whatever questions that you have for Michael, just type that into the Q&A button. And we're going to use the next about 10 to 15 minutes to do a Q&A. So Michael, there's a question here from, excuse me, there's a question here from Jay. Hey, Jay. He wanted to know, in regard to continual learning, Franch Chimero describes the feeling as everything easy is hard again. Does a web professional really have 20 years of experience or 5 years of experience repeated 4 times? What do you think about this statement as a design and branding professional?
Really great question.
Jay, that was deep.
Jay, it's a very good question. So I've never read the book, or maybe it was not a book, maybe it was just a post. Everything easy is hard again. Does a web professional really have 20 years of experience or 5 years of experience repeated 4 times? So I'm trying to dissect it, and if we're thinking about, maybe I'm answering this wrong, but you'll have to tell me if we talk about web design, especially web or UX, UI technology, that changes rapidly, and you can't really have let's say you have 20 years of experience in web design or UX UI, that's constantly changing. You constantly have to update yourself on what the new things are out there, whether it's development code or it's a new type of scroll mechanism on websites, or it's a new type of user experience, that type of thing. What is it you think about the statement as a design benefit? I think, I think I have to relearn all the time. And if I can go back, let's see, all the way back to, we're still looking at the slides. Part of this was, I'm still learning. Learning does not stop. It keeps on going, especially if you've been independent, even a business. There's this long learning curve on what they want to focus on, what are new types of strategy or marketing strategies. In books, I mean, this is why they hire, back in the Mad Men days, talk about human-centered design. That's the key word right now. People sell their stuff, but back in the Mad Men days, well, they had like psychologists. That was design thinking figured out. Like that has always been around. Designers have always known that they need to figure that out. But so I think it's ongoing. I think did I answer that, Maria? Do you think I should comment?
I think that was a good overview of, of how do you not just stay relevant, but how do you take maybe numbers of experience and apply it? And I think, continuing learning technologies, new software, new methods. And like you mentioned, even I think with design thinking, that's something that that can translate across a bunch of different platforms. And it could, relate to web design, it could relate to print, it could relate to brand identity and visual language. So, yeah.
Yeah, totally. I see another question up there.
Yep.
Could you possibly get this deck? I can provide this deck if you would like it. I don't know if I'll keep everything in it, but I can. I don't know if Marie, do you want me to give it to you for them to share on, or what?
Well, what I would recommend for Mike, who just asked this question, is each of these Zoom chats are recorded. So if you did join late, feel free to, check our Facebook page in about a day or so. We also have a YouTube channel. So if you missed anything in Michael's presentation, it will be uploaded. So feel free to just replay the video on parts that you missed, because it's pretty much, you'll get the deck in that respect.
Right.
And then for those of you that are tuned in, feel free to, ask some questions. We do have time right now with Michael. So type in those questions in the Q&A section or in the comment section on the platform you're in.
Got it. I just see another question pop up here. Let me read it.
Yep.
When billing hourly, how do you calculate your total hours? What's billable versus non-billable, considering research, correspondence, and meetings, etc.? That's a really good question too. I never, when billing hourly, how do you calculate your total hours? Well, it's partly due to knowledge of working with companies and how long they've worked on something. So when I worked at Design Box and people design, I got to see how long it took to create a project, right? Now you can do this on your own too. Is like look back, like I said, keep track of your hours. This will really help you to define how much things cost, or if they're under and you have to charge more for them. Your total hours, so you define it at the beginning. Like when I do a proposal, I propose, so many hours or so many weeks for this amount. I typically don't do hours. I do value-based pricing, unless a client needs to follow. They're like, hey, listen, can you give us at least bi-weekly kind of overview of how much is spent? And I think that, again, from a transparency standpoint, that is really good, because then you can tell a line item like, oh, I only did 3 rounds. I did 4, and I told you about that. So that's, that's being charged extra for, the amount of work. But I think it's through experience. It's just trying to go through the phase process. Like, hold on, let me go here again. So the process that I've kind of enveloped here is that, so I have in the back of my head, I'm like, I think this will, cost, or this will be so many hours. I think this will be so many hours. And to line item all the tasks that you need to do to get to what it needs. But again, that also needs some support from the beginning conversation, like with your client, like, what are you looking for? What do you need me to do? Those types of questions will really help you define how many hours it takes. What is billable versus non-billable? Considering research correspond. Well, you should, I don't know about billable. I think everything is billable, including research, including emails. That would be admin for me. Sometimes, so what I have done, my wife has created a Google Sheets document, and it actually calculates how much admin time based on previous work I've done with clients, how much admin time it takes. So there's a percentage I add into the overall cost. So that is dependent totally on what you think is right, on how many meetings. Sometimes you can specify meetings. Listen, this project will only have 3 or 6 meetings, and these are the times that they will be on, or when they will happen. I hope that helps.
No, definitely. And Michael, to your point, can you talk a little bit about that billing? So are you itemizing like administrative fee, research? Are you itemizing it by these phases? And maybe talk a little bit about that. I know there's some students that are here in the audience.
Okay, yeah. So it's typically, let me see, how do I talk about that? Well, it depends. Sometimes, so when I talk about value-based pricing, I'm talking about one project. So let's say it was a branding project and I went through the phase 1 to phase 3. Well, that's what's one, and I have a number. Sometimes I break it down by each phase so the client has an understanding. But further, even before I talk about that Google Sheet, like setting up, trying to estimate it, there's line items, and you put those hours next to them, and you have them tabulated for how much you get paid per hour. And that helps you out in terms of like figuring out how much you should get paid per project. So, like I said, sometimes clients don't want that. They don't want it. They're just going to pay you the 50% up front and 50% at the end, or in thirds, however. But some clients, my last client, KitchenAid, they wanted to see biweekly, kind of, where I am on a timely basis, which I think is great, because that helps with any hiccups that are happening. Like, we're spending too much time on this. We need to move on, or we've went over this. We need to talk about how we're gonna, if we need to do less afterwards, or we just need to attach more money to it based on the PO. It just totally depends on what your client is looking for and how you define each phase in the process.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And then there's a couple more questions here in Q&A.
Let's see. Okay, if we design logo or poster, generally in a design project, in design process, how many sketch examples can we show the client? Well, typically within the proposal that you provide them, if I'm doing a brand identity or an experience map or something that is illustrative or design in nature, I typically show 3 designs, but it depends. Like, branding is really different from doing a brochure design, because you got pages to define. So sometimes with brochures, it's a build-up. So it's sketching, like understanding the pagination of the book, how many pages and what's the content it's going to be on the book. And then it's carefully layered. So sketches, and then maybe some photos are put in with some sketches, maybe some copy. And then there's a round that goes through that. And then, better copy, because you have a copywriter now. You're starting to define the art direction of photography or illustrations that you're going to be using. So there's this buildup that happens that helps you with defining that project. But typically with sketches, I just did a talk, was it 2 weeks ago, with Ferris State University about this process that's in front of you right now, and how I did it with a company called Union Media. Now I have a binder full of sketches that I did. And these are just, again, they're word maps. there's sketches, there are ideas, there's thoughts, there's understanding, all in that. So it totally depends on how much you want to show, but you don't want to show more. I always say show your best 3, and if you have backups, that's great as well. I think your best 3 is a fine number to go on, and then from there, they can select either 1, 2, or 3, or maybe it's a merging of 1 or 2 of them together. Sometimes that happens as well, but yeah, 3 at the most, I think, in terms of sketching. But again, let me just be really clear. It's dependent on what you're producing for your client. If it's more sketching like for a brochure, it's a layered approach. If from a branding opportunity, it's definitive on like how much the client is looking for, or if the problem that I solved is right or wrong, right?
Good point. Oh, thank you.
Yep, there's one more here.
Mhm.
Can you talk about how your communication strategies have evolved over the years when working with new, challenging clients? Are there any specific words of wisdom you can impart towards developing a good client relationship? Yeah, I think building a client relationship is key, or partnership, you could say, is being transparent about how much things cost, what the client is looking for, who their users are, like being knowledgeable about what you're asking in terms of the questions. Like the book that I have it here, the design, the strategic designer. This is a really good book for kind of really defining how you are going to approach clients and how you talk about what you can do for them, or how you can solve the problem they have, whether it's a website or a brand or a product, or brochure, photography, whatever it is. So it's just really knowledge. It's built up over time. It has evolved for me because, as I said, let me just go forward. Like during my formative years at DesignVox, I was just a pair of hands. I was learning, right, as a pair of hands. That's typically how it works anyway. So you can't just really dive in without knowing or understanding what clients are gonna do. So I think, I don't know, I hope I answered that question. I think the words of wisdom is just learn, read the book, the Strategic Designer, or learn about process. Excuse me. But just being empathetic to your client as well, asking the questions. If they're asking for you to do a project, is ask as many questions as you can in order to define what that proposal is going to be and how you will solve that problem. So.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
All right. And then I actually had a question. What bookkeeping software are you using to keep track of your expenses or receivables?
That's a really good question. I have no bookkeeping software. Caitlin does it all for me.
Okay.
My wife does it all for me, who's the accountant. So what I do is I make sure that I save all my receipts. Well, okay, maybe not all of them. She does come back to me like, okay, you need to tell me what this is for. And they're defined, whether it's like for a project or, these books behind me here, they're all purchased because of a project or after a project. You can write that off on your business. But I have no booking software. We have a tax account that does all our taxes for us, and they kind of define for us what we need from them. So, yeah, I don't. Sorry, I'm not really helpful in that area.
No, that's okay. I was just curious.
Yeah.
And then also, Michael, could you talk a little bit about, I know retainers, I know I'm not as familiar with them. I just have personally not worked with them. I know there are a lot of designers that have. Could you talk a little bit about that process? Like, how does that work? Typically, what types of clients or projects require a retainer? And maybe just expound on that a little bit more.
Sure. Personally, I have not returned a retainer before. I just haven't. I've worked under POs before. I guess you could call them retainers, but really, what a retainer is just understanding. And typically, they're for longer projects. typically, if you're helping a company out over a length of period of a year or more. And what they are, they're just like a proposal. Like you propose what you're going to do for them based on what the client's need is. So it's like a contract. You say what you're going to do for them possibly every week and how you're going to get there to solve the problem that they're looking for, how long it's going to take, and how many hours you're typically, I wouldn't say many hours, but how much you expect each week. And that's depending, because if you have 2 or 3 clients that you're working on at a time, you can only spend maybe, perhaps like 20 or 30 hours on this one client. Or you can say, listen, I can only work for you for 15 hours or 20 hours a week. And it's based on like how long that project is. But it's no different than a proposal. You're just kind of saying that what the deliverables are and what the end result will be, what the client will get, and what each week you have to be paid for. So, and that can be, again, contract wise, make sure that what you're going to define, making sure that you get paid bi-weekly, checks are deposited right into your bank account, just this finite stuff like that. That's why that Tad Crawford book on legal forms for graphic designers are important to read through, because this really kind of helps define how you set up that. And I think there might be something in there for retainers as well. Does that kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would say last thing would be, where do you personally draw inspiration from?
Ooh. I think a lot has to do with cultural things that happen within our community around the world. Definitely I just started a series. Actually, why don't I just show you? Give me a second here.
Okay.
Where is it now? If I can find it. So on the whole COVID, I started this walking series. I called it Stay at Home Friends. And I'm gonna put this live soon. I don't know if I'm gonna put this on t-shirts at all or not, but that's where I plan to go. But I did a whole bunch of them over time. So wear a mask, don't hoard. Just fun, quirky stuff. Like this is the stuff that I love to do on my own. When I talked about create when you want to create, this is the time, be meaningful, but also love what you do. It might be that I'm the only one who loves this, but I'm still creating it. It still creates meaning for me and hoping for some other people. Eat healthy, stay hydrated, eat tacos, drink a tall boy, stay connected. So all these things about staying at home, what it does, what you need for them, read books, sanitize often. So, these are fun things that I like to do on the side that, even the Citizen Project where we created flags, that was meaningful to me, especially working with a group of people. Hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thank you for the preview of your project that you've been working on. Nice.
No problem.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Michael, for sharing, your background, your history, insights as being, an independent creative. And I also appreciate you being an AIG Detroit member. I know you're supporting our chapter and our community through that membership. So really appreciate having you part of AIG Detroit. And thank you for everybody who's tuned in for today's talk with Michael. Thank you for the questions. And also please know that these Zoom chats, they're free weekly live streams. So we're going to be doing some back-to-back series this week. So kicking off today with Michael, and then we'll also be hosting these through Friday through the end of this week, and then on a weekly basis through the end of June. So thank you again, Michael. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, and hope everybody was inspired today by what Michael shared and through the knowledge that you shared with us. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, take care.